Amazing. Maybe we'll wait like a minute or so just as we see people joining.
Sounds good.
Where is everybody joining from? If you want to put it in the chat, that could be super fun. I'm here from New York. Cody, where are you?
I'm from Rhode Island.
Oh, okay. So not too
Yep.
far.
Nope. I was born in Mass, but I am living in Rhode Island.
Okay. Fabulous. Wow. Oh, Bushwick, you're so close. So many cool places. OCD hell. Oh my God, that one wins.
I've
So,
been there a couple times.
yes, I lived there for years. Fortunately, I've moved out
Mhm.
of that.
Good. Yeah, the rent was a little higher.
Awesome. Okay. Very cool. So I'm super excited to be here with No CD and with Cody to do this workshop. We're going to talk taboo OCD. We're not going to get to every single taboo obsessional theme. So please know if it's not listed here, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We're just going to try to get through as much as we can in the next hour. And I will start by introducing myself, and then I'll have Cody introduce No CD and then himself. So are your pronouns he, him? I should have asked.
Yes, thank you. Yeah,
Okay, fabulous. My
yeah,
pronouns are she, her.
thank you.
So, my name's Allegra. I'm a licensed therapist and an OCD specialist. I founded the Center for OCD, Anxiety, and Eating Disorders in New York City, and I'm an OCD partner. So, I partner with them quite frequently. And I've been friends with Steven for a while. Ilias and Jaleesa are so wonderful. And I just really love what NoCD is doing for the OCD community and the accessibility of OCD treatment around the world. I'm licensed in California and New York, and I do see clients via teletherapy in certain countries, depending on the country. I love education and advocacy. They are really important values of mine, and that is why I like to do stuff like these workshops and advocate on social media. You can find me at Allegra Castins on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, although I never use Twitter or X or whatever it is. So I should delete that from this slide next time. And then we have Cody.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cody Fournier. I'm actually a licensed independent clinical social worker for the state of Massachusetts, but I live in Rhode Island right now. I work for No CD, which I absolutely love because it allows me to continue to work with members similar to myself who are diagnosed with OCD. No CD provides a specialized online therapy to help individuals with OCD, which again, even for me, when I was going through treatment, I actually went to NoCD myself, and was able to get a lot of good treatment from a therapist there. I practice telehealth. I'm in the process of opening up my own private practice in addition to working at NoCD. So super exciting work with that. I also, like I said, am diagnosed with OCD and have experienced a lot of mental intrusions around taboo thoughts. So that's why I'm super, super excited to be here, because this is actually my first workshop ever. So when I was asked to come, I was like, oh my God, yes. So I am very, very excited to be here and to be able to talk about my own OCD on top of how NoCD kind of approaches this. So
I love
thank you for
that.
having me. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. And then I'll let you talk a little bit more about No CD as well and what No CD offers.
Yeah, so NoCD is, as you can see, one of the number one telehealth providers for OCD. It is a platform that provides specialized online therapy for people with OCD. What I really like about the NoCD app and the treatment here is that they provide between session support 24/7. Through the direct messaging that you can find on the app. They have a very big community within the OCD community where people can go on the NoCD app and talk to other individuals in the community just through the app itself. Um, Also, we have in the moment response prevention. So if you're using the NoCD app and you are really struggling to kind of utilize the response prevention, we have features where you can actually do in the moment response prevention to kind of help utilize your skills. Because know personally that it can be very, very hard when you're in a triggering state. And also, there's a lot of peer support through that app, and a lot of people that are willing to book a call in the sense to talk about an OCD, to get you situated with myself and colleagues throughout the country, and even throughout the world. There's clinicians that practice throughout many other countries besides the United States. And if you want to get connected, all you have to go is to treatmyocd.com, and on the website you can book a 15-minute call, so feel free to do that. And I look forward to meeting you if anyone here is living in Massachusetts and needs help, and maybe in the future I will meet up with you via telehealth. So very, very excited to be here.
That's wonderful. So someone asked where they can find the response prevention resources on the app. So I'll have you put that in the chat. And then I just want to echo what you said about the kind of live support that you can access throughout the app. That would have been so helpful for me when I was receiving
Mhm.
treatment, because I used to live therapy session to therapy session. Like
Yeah.
one session a week just didn't feel like it was enough. And you have that 50-minute session, and then you have to go the rest of the week waiting for your therapist again, but you're struggling 24/7. So I really love that No CD offers that.
Yes, and they also have support groups as well to kind of supplement that as well. Where what is kind of fascinating with NoCD is that you can, depending on the severity, you can usually meet with a clinician twice a week until you hit a specific metric, and continuing to get better, which I love because, like you said, even when I was in treatment, one hour a week was not the best for me. I needed that ongoing support, so the app was really good for me. The twice a week was really good, and those support groups. And so
Yeah,
the more we can kind of get and supplement treatment, the better, in my opinion.
absolutely. Okay, so let's dive into the meat of it. How is taboo defined? I like including this definition: prescribed by society as improper or unacceptable. So when we're looking at taboo obsessional themes, obviously pedophile obsessions, what if I'm a pedophile? What if I snap and hurt a child? Violent obsessions, incest, bestiality, postpartum obsessions, blasphemous, suicidal, necrophilia, and bigotry. Some people do consider sexual orientation obsessions taboo. I do not. I am bisexual. I don't find being gay or queer to be taboo whatsoever, but I understand that some people grow up in very religious environments or in very bigoted environments in which having sexual orientation obsessions can be taboo. So when we think about taboo obsessions, think about those things that you would be terrified to tell someone else because you're so afraid of their judgment. Things that are illegal or wrong or that society would deem inappropriate. Anything you want to add to that, Cody?
I think you said it perfectly. I think there's two things that I was thinking when you were saying that. One is, you said society kind of creates these. So that, in my opinion, is very important, because what is acceptable to one person might be unacceptable to another, in the sense of like intrusive thoughts.
Yeah,
So intrusive thoughts. So that is very, very important, because society says it's wrong does not necessarily mean having that thought is wrong. So it's what I really try to, myself and colleagues at NoCD really try to instill, is that just because you have these thoughts and society says, oh no, this is wrong, does not mean that you are a bad person. And the second part is with the sexual orientation. I have some clients, or have worked with clients in the past, where it's usually the distress that goes against their values, that it's a lot of the times it seems like that the distress is what's causing them, because their values is to be heterosexual, and vice versa. I've also worked with individuals that were bisexual who also were kind of teetering on that, but it usually kind of went down with their values were to be heterosexual, but their OCD is saying otherwise. So just interesting points you were making, but
yeah,
you said it perfectly.
absolutely. So, and then what is an obsession? This might be common knowledge, but going through it very quickly, the DSM-5 defines it as recurrent and persistent thoughts, urges, or images that are experienced at some time as intrusive and unwanted, and that in most individuals caused marked anxiety or distress. So, a really important defining feature of obsessions is that they are ego dystonic, distressing, opposite to a person's values and beliefs and desires and self concept. they can't understand why their brain is producing these thoughts that just don't line up with what they know about themselves, as opposed to ego syntonic, which would be in alignment with one's values, beliefs, and self concept. Ego syntonic thoughts are not a part of OCD. Anything you want to add to that, Cody?
No, I think that was perfectly explained. I think actually one thing that I'm thinking about is when it comes to ego dystonic, especially with the harm OCD, which was a very big mental intrusion that I would experience. A lot of the times, and this is where I think psychoeducation is really important, because with the with those thoughts that are ego dystonic, it's when I was experiencing those harm OCD, it was I loved life and I enjoyed everything about it, but I was having these thoughts and commands of like, do it, hurt yourself. But I was like, why would I do this? Why would I have these thoughts when, I really love life? And that goes to show that ego dystonic, it was going against my values. So my OC was kind of picking what I really enjoyed and was kind of trying to torture me with it. So
Absolutely. And I see someone says, I have no judgment for those that are gay or bisexual, but it's definitely against my values. I think with sexual orientation obsessions in particular, we have to be careful about the use of the word values, right? If
yeah.
we say it's not in my values to be gay, that can be stigmatizing to people
Mm-hmm.
who are queer. So I like to describe sexual orientation obsessions as really opposite of what I know of myself, opposite
Exactly.
of my identity. And so that's how we can describe sexual orientation and gender identity obsessions. Another
100%.
important facet of intrusive thoughts is they don't just come in the form of what if. It would be so nice if they neatly wrapped up in that box of what if I'm a pedophile? What if I'm a murderer? But a lot of people, including myself, get intrusive thoughts in the form of phrases or commands like
Mm-hmm.
do it, stab them, rape them. You like this thought. You want to assault them. And it feels more real. It feels like, well, if my brain is telling me you enjoy this or to do it or that I want this, it must be more true than a what if thought. It is not. At the end of the day, it is still a thought. It is still words in your mind. Did you ever experience that in your own OCD where it wasn't just a what if, it was like, you will do this thing?
100%, 100%. Especially, I think that was the scariest thing for me in that moment, because when I was younger, I would have these commands of just jump off the parking garage, jump off the bridge, jump off this. And then that, with me being in the mental health field, I was kind of researching and doing compulsions and like what do these commands mean? And then that's where it kind of brought me over to schizophrenia. And then that's where I was like, oh my
Yes,
God,
goodness.
yeah. So then I'm like the commands, and then it wasn't until I could have been OCD, it could have been another clinician I follow on social media that they were talking about commands, and that's where I felt like that is I'm not going crazy. Are you kidding me? Like commands can be intrusive thoughts too, and that kind of gave me so much hope because I was like, oh, but I think awareness is so important. A lot of clients that I've met with, they say, I have these commands of like, do it, I love it. But it's like that can be just as intrusive as if what if I push someone down the stairs? So really, really
Yes.
important point.
Absolutely. And the fear of schizophrenia is real because I think when we think about auditory hallucinations, a
Mhm.
lot of people think that's what I'm experiencing when it's do it or you want to. The
Yep.
thing that's different is with intrusive thoughts, it's coming from your own mind internally. You're
Yep.
not hearing an external voice
Yep.
and you have insight. You know that you don't want to do this thing. Whereas if someone is experiencing schizophrenia, they might not have any insight. Another thing is unwanted images and mental movies as well. I like to say mental movies because when I was struggling, I would quite literally see myself like carrying out these thoughts in my mind. It
Mhm.
wasn't me ruminating, it was like my brain would flash me with these little movies. And so an obsession can show up as that too. Unwanted urges. Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying I don't like the word urge. I wish that we had a different word to describe this because I think when we hear about urges in society, we think about something that we desire doing. I have the urge to eat McDonald's tonight. I have the urge to have sex with my partner, whatever it might be. With OCD, it's not that the person has like the urge to do it in the sense that they desire it. It's more that they have a really strong feeling paired with a thought. And then it feels like I could do this thing. It feels like something is like pulling you toward that thought that you don't want to be having. And I guess there's something called, which I just learned about this, the call of the void. Have you heard about that, Cody?
No, that sounds
Okay, so
interesting.
it's like when you're standing on, let's say, the edge of a skyscraper, like the top of the Empire State Building, and you
Mhm.
have that feeling of like, I could just throw myself off. That's what a lot of people with OCD experience, but they don't want to do it. And then the urges to push someone in front of a bus, to jump off the building, to yell out a profanity or slur, to kiss someone, that then feels like evidence that the obsession is true. Well, I'm not just having this thought, but I feel this strong internal pull to do this thing that I don't want to do. And so, what I always tell my clients is an urge is not automatically indicative of desire. So, we practice mindfulness of thoughts and feelings, and we can do that with urges too. We can notice it without judgment and do nothing about it.
I think that was well said. I think that is another point. The commands and then also the urges is what really helped with my harm OCD because, again, you said it perfectly. When I was up on the first time I've ever experienced harm OCD, it was because I had that urge to come up. And then once that urge came up intrusively, and I was then trying to figure out why I was having that, and that would scare the crap out of me because I'm like, why am I having this feeling to kind of do it, but I really don't want to do it? Am I going to lose control and just jump? And
Yep.
over time, like I would start avoiding, and then every time I was high up, I would really start to panic. And the more I panicked, the more urge I felt to want to just jump. Where it was just so egostonic because I'm like, I want to be here, but what is going to take over me and make me, kind of throw myself overboard? And it is very scary to experience that. But I think members and clients that know that urges can be just as intrusive can be very, very empowering and helpful because it's not just always the intrusive thought, it's the sensations, the feelings, the urges that come, that can be just as
Yeah,
intrusive and try to trick us. So
totally. And that fear of snapping is so
yes.
real.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go a little bit in depth with sexual obsessions. Again, we're not going to cover every single facet. So if we don't list it, it doesn't mean that it's not real or true. So, a relentless fear that a person is a pedophile or attracted to a family member, animal, or a dead person as well. Unwanted sexual thoughts, images, or mental movies that play out in a person's mind. So, let's say an image of a sexual act with a dog that just keeps popping into your mind. Could be relentless what if thoughts. What if I'm attracted to kids? What if I want to have sex with dead bodies? What if I'm aroused when my child sits on my lap? What if I sexually assaulted someone in the past and I just don't remember? What if I snap and rape someone? It could also be the unfounded, and I put that because it's very important, fear that someone close to you is a pedophile, rapist, incestuous, or into bestiality and necrophilia. Anything that you want to add to this, Cody?
It's interesting because for me, I feel like I'm in a really good place with my OCD. Because when it comes to intrusions, I anything is fair game. So I don't put a limit on what I can experience. I kind of invite it because I know my brain is very, very creative. And I feel like a lot of people with OCD are one of the smartest, most creative, most like intelligent people, that their brain just kind of gets too creative and then it kind of goes against us. But all of those, what you just said, I've experienced. And it's just interesting, even being in this workshop right now, I get flashes of intrusive thoughts when you mention it, but I just kind of see it as background noise, and I'm like, okay, thanks. And then I still, kind of pay attention to I pay attention to what you're saying. So even a therapist in of itself can experience
Yeah.
these even right now. So,
Yeah,
but I don't allow it to kind of rule me because I know my
absolutely.
brain is creative. Yeah.
No, I feel that so much. I always say to my clients, if if your brain has thought it, my brain has definitely thought it. My
Mm-hmm.
brain will go there. I just expect it like at my grandma's funeral, what if you do something to her dead body? Like my brain
Yeah.
just it knows no bounds whatsoever.
Exactly.
And it
Yep.
feels like a blessing and a curse to be very creative because I do think a lot of people with OCD are creative, but then it's
Yeah.
like that creativity, it haunts us when it
Yeah.
comes to intrusive thoughts.
Yeah. Right when the imagination kind of pulls you into it a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, what's really important and what I do first when I'm working with clients who have POCD is I differentiate between POCD and pedophilia. Some clinicians might think, well, aren't you just providing reassurance? No, this is very important psychoeducation.
Mm-hmm.
Clients need to know this. Now, if I'm telling this to my client over and over and over and over again, that's when it would fall into reassurance. So, education, if we're looking at what pedophilia is, it's a paraphilia in which sexual acts or fantasies involving pubertal children are
Mhm.
persistently preferred or the exclusive method of achieving sexual excitement. So with pedophilia, it is egosyntonic. Even if the person doesn't want to be having the thoughts, they know that they are attracted to children. They know that they are sexually interested in them. They're not doubting whether they're a pedophile, and pedophiles often act on their attraction toward children. This is the exact opposite of someone with OCD who performs compulsion after compulsion to prevent something bad from happening, to prevent the person from doing something sexually to a child. And with OCD, the obsessions are egosyntonic. The person is doubting what they know about themselves, which is, I'm not a pedophile. I can't understand why I'm having these thoughts. So there is a big difference, and clients do need to know this so that they feel comfortable opening up to you and so that they can practice response prevention. If they think that POCD and pedophilia are the same thing, of course they're going to perform compulsions. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I think you said it perfectly. I myself and my colleagues at NoCD, just similar to what you were saying too, psychoeducation is so important in with POCD and with any OCD theme,
Mhm.
that when there's a fine line between ego syntonic and ego dystonic. And I think there's also a part of information seeking versus reassurance seeking, where when we're
Yeah.
doing that psychoeducation initially, we're doing information seeking. If again we do this and then every session the client comes to us and saying, but Cody, how do you know? Are you sure I'm not a pedophile? Do you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? That's where that reassurance seeking is happening. And that's a lot different because even therapists can act as reassurance without even knowing it. So
Right.
we have to be careful with that. But I think again, psychoeducation, because a lot of clients and myself included, when you come and you have these type of intrusions, a lot of times they're talking to they're very, very distressed. And
Yeah.
usually sometimes too, and this is might not be for everyone, a lot of the times with the POCD thoughts, they just kind of come out of the blue. And it's either when they're looking at a child, they're hugging a child, they're doing something, and then all of a sudden they have that one intrusive thought, and then their brain marks it as important, and it boom, it causes super, super high anxiety, where it's typical OCD doing what it's doing and we're misappraising it. And then it kind of, we try to
Yeah.
figure it out and then it kind of sets off. So psychoeducation,
Totally.
very important. Yeah.
Yeah. And POCD was my main theme. So if anyone here is struggling with that, that was what I struggled with the
Yeah.
most. And what I like to validate too with clients, I hope that makes sense, is while all OCD is difficult, I am not at all saying that
Mhm.
POCD is any more or less difficult. I often find that there's an added layer of stigma
Yeah.
associated with pedophile obsessions that exacerbates a person's shame. So when people come to me saying, I wish I had any other obsession, I
Mhm.
validate that because it's just easier to say to someone, I'm worried that my hands are contaminated and that I have cancer than it is to say, I'm worried that I'm a pedophile because I'm having sexual thoughts about children.
Yeah. Agree. And yeah, just because that word in and of itself and
Yeah.
how society has marked it as very being taboo. And where if someone's like, oh, I'm contaminated, what if I get cancer, X, Y, and Z? A lot of um, the public or anyone that doesn't have OCD, they can kind of empathize and or sympathize and say like, oh, well, I want you to get help. But when it comes to the, the POCD stuff, just that word in and of itself, people will kind of jump from that. And you can tell
Yep.
them to your blue in the face that these are just intrusive thoughts. But if you don't know and you're not educated on OCD, I want to say a lot of people will just filter out that and just see that word and mark it as, nope, I don't want to talk. Or, yep,
Yeah.
you're definitely, and that's very stigmatizing and very, very
Yeah.
isolating. So yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, I want to talk about what feels like evidence for sexual obsessions. A lot of my clients come to me and say, I have all of these reasons that I feel like my obsessions could be true. So, with sexual obsessions, what I commonly see is, well, I played doctor or mom and dad with a sibling when I was younger, and we touched each other's body parts. That means that I am a pedophile. That is evidence. And what I like to provide education about is no, there's very developmentally normal child sexual curiosity and play that's age appropriate. That is not evidence that you are a pedophile or a past history of child sexual abuse in the family. I should have put a trigger warning on that. So I deeply apologize. I have clients who unfortunately have been molested in the past and they now feel like, well, if I was molested, then I'm going to turn into a perpetrator and
Mhm.
maybe it runs in the family.
Mhm.
And that is not evidence that you are a pedophile. And then also groinal responses or arousal non-concordance. Well, when I have these intrusive thoughts or images, I feel something in my groinal area. This must mean that I like it, which is not the case. And we are going to go through that in the next slide. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Cody?
It's really funny with the arousal part because that is something. Even probably a couple of weeks ago, I was hanging out with my dogs and I gave them a hug, and I think I got a sensation in my groin. But now I'm at the point where it's like, oh, there's just a sensation because I know how intrusive it can be. Where say 10 years ago, I was holding my dog and I go, oh my god, am I attracted to my dog? What does this mean? What does my sensation mean? So it's just it. You can, if I can do it in the sense, if I can go through treatment and work on this, and I'm very very hopeful that other people don't have to suffer when they experience these type of intrusive sensations, and that it's just our bodies trying to trick us. So when you said the arousal part and the sensation, that still happens to me today, but I just allow it to happen and I don't really try to dig into it. So
Yeah, definitely. So, arousal non-concordance. This is really important education for sexual obsessions. And if you haven't seen her work or read her book, Emily Nagoski is the author of Come As You Are, and she has a really great TED Talk about arousal non-concordance, where ultimately she provides education on genital responses, not automatically equating desire. So we can feel something in our groinal area, and that doesn't mean that we now enjoy it and are aroused by it. Our body tends to respond to what is sexually relevant. So our body hears a sexual thought and it responds. It doesn't really check in with our value system and say, wait, do you desire this or not? We just feel something. And in the book, what was really interesting to me is an actual genital response versus subjective arousal. For men, about 50% of the time, they really are aroused when they have a genital response. For women, there's only a 10% overlap. So 10% of the time, they are actually aroused by something, they desire it when they are having a genital response. So feeling something in your genital area is not automatically evidence that you like this. It's just that your body is responding to this because that's what bodies do. And what can be really helpful with arousal non-concordance is a mindfulness. So if you're automatically having a groaner response, allowing it to exist without judgment, and then also the response prevention piece of not checking for that groaner response, which is really common for people with OCD. Let me check to see if I'm feeling something. And then because you're checking, you feel something, and then that feels like evidence. Anything
exactly.
you want to add to that, Cody?
I probably 10 out of 10 times when I'm checking for something, I'm going to find it. So like, it's just a paradox. Like when people they're checking for something, usually it might not be that second, but you're probably going to find something. And which is then you're going to maybe misinterpret as being evidence. So try not to check. I think
Yeah.
once we continue to resist that, you're going to be on your way to being able to allow that and, be
Yeah.
present of whatever's happening. Yeah.
Totally. And a lot of people think, well, if I'm just allowing this groaner response to exist, then that means that it's true. If I'm
Yeah.
not fighting with or suppressing the groaner response, then I'm telling my brain that I like this. That is not the case.
Yeah.
You are being mindful of a bodily sensation, just as we're mindful of thoughts and images and feelings. So, feeling something in your genitals when you have a sexual thought doesn't mean that you find it appealing or that you desire it. You can have an erection, feel wet or lubricated, etc., and not find it appealing or desirable. So if we're talking about the more taboo compulsions, I will sometimes have clients go to the bathroom, pull down their pants, check their underwear to see is there any kind of lubrication because they want to make sure that they are not aroused. And then if they see something, it's, oh my God, this obsession is true, which is not the case. And again, trigger warning for assault, please mute me or exit out if that is something you don't want to hear about. Arousal non-concordance shows up with victims of sexual assault whose bodies might respond, like they might orgasm, even though they are not at all enjoying what is happening. That is similar to arousal non-concordance with OCD. Our body is responding even though we are disgusted up here by the thoughts. Okay. Sex and sexual obsessions. Really difficult for clients. If I have a client with sexual obsessions and they are sexually active, most of these things tend to pop up. First and foremost, intrusive thoughts and images that pop in during sex. It would be lovely if we could just shut it off and tell our brain for the next hour or however long, can you not produce these thoughts? But that is just not the case. Our brain is going to produce sexual thoughts during sex that then feel like, well, if I'm having these thoughts while I'm having sex, they must be more true. Mindfulness is going to be your best friend when this happens, noticing what's coming up without judgment and then bringing yourself back to the sexual experience, what you're seeing, tasting, smelling, etc., so that you're in the present moment. Orgasming while a thought pops in. This totally happens to people. And then it feels like, wait, I just orgasmed when that thought popped in. That means I orgasmed to that thought. No, that is not what that means. That means a thought popped in at the time of climax. Masturbating to get rid of groaner responses. I've had quite a few clients do this, and then they think, wait, am I now masturbating to that intrusive thought? When what they're really doing is they felt something down there with a groaner response after having a thought, and then they masturbated to just get rid of the groaner response or because they felt something. That is not inherently evidence. Some people masturbate while thinking about an obsession to check for arousal, and that is a game that you are not going to win. If you are engaging in something sexually while you're thinking about an obsession, it's probably going to feel like you like it. And then OCD appearing in dreams. So just as we don't believe everything we think, we don't believe everything that we dream. Our dreams tend to be an extension of conscious thought. So if you're thinking about something during the day, like sexual obsessions, it might appear in your dreams. You might have a sex dream with a parent, a child, a friend, etc. That's not evidence that your obsession is true. And we can practice mindfulness and non-judgment with that as well. Anything that you want to add to this?
I think the mindfulness piece is very crucial in the not being non-judgmental. It's interesting because even you just talking about this, you're probably helping a lot of people in this chat, because that is, I think, very the amount of clients I see with that type of intrusion is a lot. And so what happens when it comes to this is that they have these intrusive thoughts, and then during sex or after sex or when they're masturbating, then they try to figure out why they're having it, and then that's where that rumination spiral kind of keeps going. Those, you can, even in the past, I've had during being intimate, having thoughts of like deceased family members of mine. And now if that comes in, yes, it's the last thing I want to think about, but I also just am not non-judgmental. I use the mindfulness techniques, and then it kind of goes in as quick as it came out. But I don't care if it's there the whole time, and if it wants to come, go ahead. But it's
Yeah.
that is very, very important, because a lot of people say, no, well, sex is just the only time that I just don't want to have OCD. And then that in of itself, OCD is like,
Oh God, that is an invitation. That is
exactly.
an invitation.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
even also with sleep, I always say like sleep is fair game, because when people right before they fall asleep, sometimes they hear not voices, but they might hear right before they drift off. And then they also say, oh my God, I'm going to go crazy because I heard voices right before I was going to fall asleep. So I think that is a big thing to be aware of, that a lot of people will hear things right before they drift off. And then also when people are dreaming in of itself, they'll wake up, it's, oh my God, that's evidence that I really want to do this. But like you said it perfectly, a lot of the dreams are things that we thought about the day before or throughout the day that kind of just are processed at night. And I would still be non-judgmental with that, because you just let it be, and don't try to figure out what the dreams are, and you're going to be, in my opinion, a lot more successful in being able to allow and to not have it ruin your day, basically.
Yeah, an attitude of acceptance
Yeah.
is such a
Yep.
massive tool. And by acceptance, I don't mean accept that the thoughts are true. I mean accept that you're having this internal
Yep.
experience.
Yep.
And another example I'll use with dreams is, I don't know if you've ever watched like a murder movie before bed or something really violent. And then in your dreams, there's like guns and blood, and you were just watching that before bed. Of course, your brain is going to produce that while you're asleep.
Yep.
Same goes with sexual obsessions. If you are ruminating about sexual obsessions throughout the day, you might dream about that.
Exactly. Well, what I think is fascinating about that too is when people say, "Oh my God, what if I lose control and am a serial killer?" and that causes them so much distress. But then, on the same breath, they're watching scary movies, and
Yes,
they're like,
it's
"Oh,
so
that's
true.
fine. That's fine."
Yes.
So it's just that is a big, big OCD type of predicament that happens. So it's just interesting how that kind of does
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. Okay, violent obsession. So for my harm, suicidal obsession, folks, think about relentless, violent, intrusive, and unwanted thoughts. So again, they're opposite to a person's desires and beliefs. Would I enjoy killing someone? Am I a cannibal? What if I stab my cat with this knife? Could I snap, go crazy, and commit a mass shooting? Could I harm myself? And it can also come in the form of images, mental movies, or urges. Like you might see in your mind you stabbing someone or cutting their head off. You might feel an urge to push someone in front of a bus, and therefore you compulsively avoid public transportation. Obviously, these are just a couple of examples. Anything you want to add, Cody?
No, anything violent can be an obsession. So, and like we
Yeah,
said before, our brains are very creative. So we can take one thing and blow it up into something super violent, and then our imagination kind of grabs hold of it, and then we take off. But again, anything can be an obsession, especially violence.
absolutely. So there's one other thing. What was I going to say here? Oh, I have a client. It's the funniest thing. They talk about their obsessions as like a collab. So when sexual and violent meet, let's say, I'll have clients who fear that they are aroused by violence. So
Yeah,
there's kind of a mix of that. Like, what if I see this murder on screen and I feel aroused by it?
yeah.
Um, Okay. Let's talk about false memories. So I put it in quotes because a false memory is ultimately still a thought. It's just a thought that you fear happened. It can be something that is completely made up. So an image or a movie that pops in randomly, or the false memory can incorporate things from something that actually happened, which then feels like evidence. So let's say you're in your parked car waiting for your partner to come outside, and then you have an image of you harming your child in the car seat. Later on, being in the car and feeling super anxious with your child feels like evidence now that the assault happened. Or it might just be a random mental movie of you assaulting your child that pops in out of the blue, and you start to worry, oh my gosh, is this a real memory? Is this something that I actually did? When we look at false memories, though, as any other obsession that's a thought or an image or a mental movie, it's easier to deal with. And I say to clients, the absence of, what do I say? It is 8:08 p.m. Give me
I
20
I
seconds to
hear
think
you.
about this. It is, if you don't have a memory of something, like, are you going to go to the police and say, I have zero evidence that this thing exists, but I think I killed someone? Right? Like, not having evidence is not enough to substantiate an obsession. Is there anything you want to add to this?
I think another type of theme that I see with false memory is when individuals potentially have a couple drinks that night, and or if they got intoxicated the night before and they wake up and then they have these memories come up of like, what if I actually said that to the person, or what if I did this when I was drinking, and then they try to go back into that memory, and mentally review it, which then again will
Oh,
continue to feed it. But drinking is a big trigger because then people will say, no, I don't want to drink ever, I don't want to ever do it, and then that kind of acts as avoidance, which then will kind of exacerbate the symptoms.
yeah, definitely. Drinking is a huge trigger for OCD in general and
Yeah.
false memories because when we drink, sometimes we naturally don't remember
Mm-hmm.
everything or our inhibition is lowered. But again, that is not evidence.
Yeah.
We don't just magically turn into some violent monster when we're drinking.
Yeah.
And then I'm so sorry. My dogs are being so loud. I hope you can't
I
hear
can't
that.
hear. No.
Okay. They're decided it's time to, I don't even know what they're doing. Okay. Mentally reviewing can also create false memories.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going over and over and over and over something that happened in the past, what research shows us is that the memory becomes less clear. We might start to remember things that didn't actually happen. So if you are compulsively reviewing things in the past, that is kind of an invitation to experience false memories. All right, suicidal obsessions. And I know someone asked for us to expand on this. So sometimes people have intrusive and unwanted thoughts related to suicide that is totally opposite to their desires and beliefs. Do I want to kill myself? What if I snap and harm myself? Could I cut myself with these scissors? Girls, I'm so sorry. It's like,
You can't hear him.
okay,
Yeah.
it is so loud. I'm like, Coco, please stop. Okay, what if I take this knife and just snap and slit my wrists? As with any other obsession, they can come in the form of images, mental movies, urges. And this tends to be a trickier thing for people as well because they worry, well, if I say this to a therapist, are they going to hospitalize me? And unfortunately, I have worked with people who have been wrongly hospitalized because the therapist couldn't understand the difference between suicidal obsessions and suicidal ideation when there is a very big difference. Is there anything that you want to add, Cody, before getting into this slide?
Well, this is one of my favorite ones because I was actually hospitalized inappropriately for harm OCD.
Oh,
Yeah,
goodness.
but I also see it as it saved my life because this was when a lot of the OCD treatment wasn't really available. And I remember one of the clinicians there gave me a packet that talked about pure obsessions, and I don't think it was harm obsessions, but something that I really connected with, and my world changed right when that happened because that's when I felt validated, like, oh my God. But it also stunk because I was in the psych ward. But once I found that, yeah,
It's
once
not
I
funny.
was, but yeah, it's, when
It
I was
also
there,
sucks because I was in the psych
I got to
ward.
play basketball. So I
Yeah.
took it as, I met some good people and like, but it did change my life. But I'm that happens a lot. And that's why even at NoCD, myself and the colleagues, like that's probably one of the first things we explain is the difference between someone who's suicidal and having suicidal OCD. And what we have to do to keep someone safe compared to when someone is sharing their intrusions, which is a lot different than when someone is actually really thinking about harming themselves.
Yes, most definitely. And a couple of key points in terms of the differences. Suicidal thoughts, images, and urges as they relate to OCD is unwanted. There's not a wish to die. Whereas someone experiencing suicidal ideation tends to align with the thoughts about suicide. They might sound like a viable option, like an escape to the person who's really suffering. With suicidal OCD, the person doesn't want to die, which is why the obsessions are so frightening to them. Whereas with suicidal ideation, the person can desire being free from pain and suffering. Like when my OCD was really loud, I had chronic suicidal ideation for a few years. And that was egosyntonic to me in the sense of like it did sound like an escape.
Yeah.
And with suicidal OCD, the person is performing compulsions to prevent suicide. So they're hiding sharp objects. They are not cooking with knives, as opposed to someone with suicidal ideation who might develop a plan, means, or intent. They might start to think about how could I do this thing? The opposite of someone with suicidal OCD. Someone with suicidal OCD does not have the plan, means, or intent to die, whereas with suicidal ideation, not always, but sometimes people might develop a plan to kill themselves. What gets tricky, and I know somebody is probably going to ask this, is sometimes suicidal OCD can get so bad that a person is like, fuck it, I just want an escape, and then
Mhm.
can be like that odd mixture. But suicidal OCD and suicidal ideation are two very different things.
I agree. And that's where, again, with the psychoeducation is going to be very important at the beginning of session or at the beginning of treatment, because I think that can be very helpful. And I also think this is a big reason why people that are really trying to take the next step to get help to work with a trained professional, this can really help someone have a professional kind of differentiate between these two instead of trying to do this on your own. Aw, cute dog. And try to kind of fight this alone because you don't have to fight this alone.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
what's your dog's name?
Oh, this is Ruby.
Ruby. Nice.
And someone in the chat is saying my brain tries to confuse me. Of course, it's not always this clear cut.
Yeah.
And when you live with a doubting disorder, of course, your brain is trying to cast doubt on what you know about yourself. So we're not at all saying, well, once you just know that it's OCD, you stop worrying about it. That is certainly not the case. All right, let's talk about some common taboo compulsions. Staring is a big one. So, staring at the subject of the obsession to check that there is not arousal. That might be staring at children, staring at your dog, staring at the body parts of other people. And you're staring while you're checking to reassure yourself that this is not something that you enjoy. And then people tend to feel a lot of guilt and shame after, well, I was just staring at a kid and checking if I'm aroused. What kind of person does that make me? Someone with OCD. Testing or checking behaviors. Someone might engage in intimacy as a checking compulsion. So let's say there is a lesbian who has obsessions. What if I'm straight? And they just know that they're not straight, but they are so, what's the word? They are so tormented by these obsessions that they might have sex with a man to
Mhm.
check, even though it's totally opposite to their values. Someone with suicidal obsessions might hold a knife to their wrist to test, would I do this? Can I snap? Do I like this?
Mhm.
As I said earlier, checking for physical arousal. You might check your underwear for discharge. You might look at your nipples. I'll have clients sometimes say, well, if my nipples are erect, then that means I am aroused and this obsession is true. Not the case.
Yeah.
Purposely bringing on the thought, which tends to also cause a lot of guilt and shame in people. I'm going to purposely bring on this thought to test how I feel about it. Whether you purposely thought about something or it popped into your mind, it is still a thought. It is still words in your mind. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that it is any more true. Hypothesizing. So that could be imagining the feared scenario in your mind to check how you feel about it.
Mhm.
Imagining what it would be like to stab your dog, to have sex with your sister, because you want to prove to yourself that you don't want to do this thing. There are so many other taboo compulsions, but we wanted to list a couple. Is there anything else that you want to add, Cody?
When it comes to um, I think I lost my train of thought on that. But when it comes to the hypothesizing, I see that a lot where actually I found it. The thought action fusion I think is very, very important here because when individuals will have these intrusive thoughts, especially about harm, there's two parts of the thought action fusion as people think, oh, I had these thoughts, therefore this means that I'm going to likely carry out this event or carry out this
Yep.
action. On the other part, it's, oh, I had these thoughts, therefore I am a bad person because I just had these thoughts. So I think
Yep.
that is really, really important to stress because, and that's where the self compassion comes in because a lot of people, they just beat the crap out of themselves for having these thoughts. And that's where, for me, that's where I say anything is fair game. I know my brain is
Yep.
creative. I invite it. I allow it. I doesn't mean I like it, but I'm just going to tolerate it and be with it and not push it away.
Yeah.
And I kind of really over it through a lot of time and practice and kind of just got fed up with OCD and wanted to do something different because my old ways wasn't working. So when I
For
started to really
sure.
do that, that's when I started having compassion about myself and really getting confidence that I don't need to run from this. So
No. Yeah, I love that you say that because acceptance was the tool that helped me
yeah.
the most in my own treatment. I so badly wanted to get rid of the thoughts. I kept coming into my therapist
Mhm.
saying, when are these thoughts going to go away? And it got to the point where she basically said, like, they're not.
Yeah.
And you need to accept that. And that really changed my recovery because I like it just for some reason it really sunk in like, wait, you're right. These thoughts aren't going to go away, especially if I'm fighting with them. So when I learned to accept that they will exist, to invite them, to bring them on, I actually over time started to experience less of them,
Yep.
which is so counterintuitive, but acceptance changed my life. The other compulsion that I didn't write that I definitely should have is porn. So
Yep.
with sexual obsessions, a lot of people check when it comes to porn and then end up feeling super guilty or end up feeling like, well, I felt aroused while I was watching this porn, so it must mean that it is true.
Yep.
When again, of course, you're feeling aroused, you're watching porn. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Guilt and shame, like we were just talking about this. I like to differentiate with clients. Guilt being feeling like you've done something bad. It tends to be about our actions. So I had a bad thought. It's bad that I've had this thought. Whereas shame tends to be characterological. So feeling like we are a bad or wrong person. And with taboo obsessions, I do validate to clients, there tends to be an added layer of guilt and shame. People tend to feel more bad and wrong when they're having pedophile obsessions and violent obsessions. These feelings are valid because you're feeling them, but that doesn't mean that they're rational. You've done nothing wrong by having these thoughts, and you aren't a bad person. You're not a monster. You are someone with OCD whose brain is misfiring. So, understanding that you can feel something and that it doesn't mean that it's factual can be super helpful.
I agree. And I think out of all topics, and I know we want to have compassion with ourselves if it's contamination or moral scrupulosity, or I think in my biased opinion, the taboo intrusions is probably one of the biggest because people again will the guilt and shame. And there's been a lot of times where I've met with clients and you can just see it on their face that they are so defeated and so just horrified that why would they ever think this, and that's where again the psychoeducation is really really important. But that self-compassion, as easy as it sounds, can really help someone kind of just not always believe that their thoughts mean anything,
Yeah.
or and so again, a lot of people will kind of say, no, I'm not going to use self-compassion. But then once they start to actually buy into it and they talk nice to themselves, they start seeing that I am actually feeling a little better because I'm not constantly putting myself down. It's like, why do you want to put yourself down? This is your safe haven. You got to be nice to yourself and be nice to yourself when you have these thoughts because everyone does. So,
Yeah. And mindfulness can really help with this
yep,
too, because with mindfulness, we're coming at our thoughts, our feelings, whatever's happening internally with that attitude of non-judgment.
yep,
So thoughts and feelings aren't good or bad, they just are.
yep,
We are the ones that place that kind of intrinsic or moral value on them. Thoughts are words in the mind. That's really what they are.
yep,
So
yep.
when we're being mindful, I don't have my clients go, there's that bad thought again.
Yep.
It's, I notice I've had that thought. Okay, I'm going to let it exist.
Exactly. That's exactly what I do with my clients. Also for myself, I kind of see those
Yeah.
thoughts as people walking by. If someone is talking smack to me and they're walking by, I'm just going to say, "Oh, thank you for that." But if I wanted to go and try to fight them, then that's going to bring on a whole slew of problems. So I see the intrusive
Yeah.
thoughts, and I'm mindful of the fact that okay, they can just pass on by, and I can show that they're relevant and
Yeah.
not important. So.
Yeah. And then in terms of shame and guilt, what therapists, if there are any therapists here, can do to make clients feel more comfortable, be open and be
Mhm,
explicit. Do not beat around the bush with clients.
mhm,
So, instead of saying something like, well, sometimes we have odd thoughts about animals, you might say, some people have thoughts about fingering their dog or cutting their dog with a knife. So, giving examples to clients that make them feel more comfortable to open up about their thoughts. When we're vague and we're not really saying what it is that we want to be saying, we could be unintentionally making a client feel more shame. Providing education about the different facets of taboo obsessional themes is really important. The groinal response, unwanted urges, it feeling very real, and then providing examples of taboo obsessions, even if a client hasn't opened up about them. So if I'm seeing a new client and they say, well, I have contamination obsessions, sometimes that might be the only thing that they're comfortable sharing until they get to know you. And then I might say, totally, contamination obsessions are very common, and people have these kinds of obsessions as well. So I name it to see if that helps them feel more comfortable. And I let
mhm.
them know I know that this exists and I've experienced this too. Is there anything that you want to add, Cody?
No, I agree. I keep saying no, but then I'm adding something. So I'll say yes. I think that is a really good point. Where I think even with some of the associate therapists that I supervise, and I always kind of go back in the sense of like you want to build a trusting therapeutic relationship, especially with individuals that have taboo type of thoughts, because someone that's been experiencing these for 10, 15, 40 years, they're just not going to go and say, oh, hey, I'm having these intrusive thoughts of touching a dog inappropriately. Like you have to make them feel safe and non-judgmental and allow them to have that space to be able to open up about how they're feeling. And all the information that you provided today can I'm just very grateful that you created this, because this in of itself could save lives. And someone that's watching this right now, or that has been beating themselves up, could be looking at this saying, "This is Allegra is giving me hope. Allegra is allowing me to actually start to know that I'm not alone. That I actually want to go and get help." And if there's anything I can kind of continue to say is like there is help out there, and you can continue to get better. And we're proof. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cody. That's so kind. There was
Welcome.
something that you said that I wanted to add to, but I feel like I'm gonna forget. Do, 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 do. talking about therapists, what therapists can do. Oh, the one other thing that I wanted to
Mhm.
add in thinking about what you were saying is when I'm training my interns or other clinicians, I always talk about the poker face.
Yep.
We do not want to act surprised when a client, and I'm honestly never surprised. Clients will come
Me
in and
either.
be like, I have the scariest, worst thought you've ever heard in your life. And I'm like, okay, give it to me. And
Yeah.
it's like the most minor thing ever. And then they come in next week and they're like, do you remember what I said? And I'm like, no, I don't even remember what I had for lunch 2 hours ago.
Exactly.
So, not making clients feel like this is the craziest thing you've ever heard. And if you're an OCD specialist, like there's nothing that's off limits. There's nothing a client can say that will shock me at this point.
That is 100%. And I think that's, and again, I think clients, and I thought this as well, is like, oh, when we tried, because unfortunately, I've been through 3 to 5 therapists that did not know how to
Yep.
treat OCD. And if you have every right to interview that clinician, you have every right to ask questions on how they treat OCD. And if they are providing vague or they aren't really you can tell that their reaction is a little tough around like these
Yep.
type of usually, like you said it perfectly, if you truly work with an OCD specialist that has been working in this field for a good amount of time or has worked with a lot of different clients, they're usually not phased about what, because they know it's just thoughts. But if you
Of
talk to
course.
someone, yeah, that doesn't have a lot of experience or just is saying, oh, I can treat this, but they really don't, but they kind of get shocked when you're saying that, that could be a red flag. But and you do have the choice to find another therapist if that's the case. But do the interviewing.
Absolutely. So, taboo obsessions and just obsessions in general. Do I need to tolerate uncertainty with taboo OCD? Not more than anyone without OCD. So, if someone without OCD gets to know that they are not a murderer or they are not a pedophile, so do you. Maybe, maybe not can be a super helpful diffusion technique. I love it to just say, maybe I'm moving on, but it's not something to literally believe when it comes to obsessions that cast doubt on what we know. So I don't need my client believing I could be a pedophile to recover. What I want to happen is they resolve doubt and they trust themselves
Mhm.
more. As I talked about earlier, there is a definition of a pedophile. And if my client doesn't meet that, I don't need them saying, well, I guess I could be. And that brings us to the difference between uncertainty and doubt, which I know sound like the same thing. With uncertainty, we don't have knowledge about something. We need more information. So I'm uncertain about the weather on Friday. I don't know what the weather is going to be like. When we're doubting something, we tend to distrust, we lack confidence in. And with taboo obsessions, people tend to doubt what they know. I know I'm not a pedophile, but I'm distrusting that because I'm having these really vivid images, or I know that I don't want to kill myself, but it feels so real that I'm starting to doubt that. It's not that the person doesn't have that knowledge. They do, but they're doubting that knowledge. So I really want to point this out because I think sometimes the like you have to accept uncertainty language can harm people with taboo
Yeah.
obsessions who are like, wait, but I know I'm not this thing. Why are you asking me to accept that? Anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I think sometimes too with the cognitive diffusion technique, sometimes depending on where someone is in treatment, it can be just too much in the beginning for someone to be like, oh, maybe not. Or to what I've noticed too is to really kind of explain like what that purpose of using that is. And for me, a part of it I use it is like we kind of just want to throw a wrench into that OCD cycle and to do something different. And but it doesn't again mean that you agree with it, doesn't mean that you want to do it. It's something where you've been listening to the same OCD story, and it's time to the maybe nots to just do something different to just allow that to be there and to not pull that bait. But uncertainty, how I kind of see it, and I heard this I think analogy before, is like, oh, where's my keys? Oh, I can't find my keys, and then you find your keys. The doubt part is, oh, I have my keys. Are these sure my keys? What if these are my wife's keys? So those type of uncertainty versus doubt can be very tricky for some people. And I wouldn't get too harped up on, trying to, I have to sit with uncertainty with this. It's more of like kind of keep it simple and go back to the basics. I see a lot of people with taboo thoughts try to have like a perfectionistic type of mindset when it comes to treatment, and they're like, I need to sit with uncertainty. I need to be perfect at this, and then that is another way that OCD kind of comes in and really tries to ruin it. So I think the way you
Yeah.
explained it was perfect.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that is all we have for the presentation part. We will get into the Q&A.
Perfect timing too. Look at
I
that.
know, right on time. That's so wild. Julissa, do you know how we are doing the Q&A? Is it in the chat or are we allowing people to raise their hand? Uh-oh. I hope.
She's on her lunch break, probably getting food. I'm just kidding.
Okay. So, oh,
I
people,
was kidding.
oh wait. What is the Q&A? Sorry, Julissa. I've never actually done a webinar in this way. Is this, the Q&A. Perfect, perfect. Okay. So, let's tag team. So, we have a question. Is it wrong? Oh, wait.
Oh, there's the cube. Okay,
Okay.
there it is.
Is it? Yes. I think, Julie said, do we just hit end? You're so welcome, everyone.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Okay. Awesome.